Hey guys, I hope you're doing well and welcome to my Andariels Visage Heartseeker guide. So in the recent patch, Andariels Visage got a pretty nice buff, so the flat damage got increased by 50%, and also instead of proccing from the player, the Poison Novas now are procced by the monsters itself. So you can also play a range stroke build like Heartseeker and combine this with Andariels Visage and proc the Novas directly at the enemies. So these are pretty nice buffs, which also inspired me to do this build here. The only problem is that right now there is a bug in the game where the buffs that I was just talking about are not active at all right now. So we are still playing with the old kind of Andariels Visage here. So also in the gameplay here you can see this Andariels Visage is not buffed at all because, well, it's not working right now, as always. Classic Blizzard. So yeah, all the rogues are still waiting for the next hotfix, which should arrive either today or maybe tomorrow when you are watching this video here. So why am I doing this video then? The problem is I'm not gonna be at home in the next few days. So I wanted to quickly make this guide so you guys just have it right now and don't have to wait another week or so. So yeah, just so you know, there will be a hotfix today or tomorrow when you watch this video, and Andariels Visage will get fixed and will deal much more damage, and this will also allow you to play a ranged rogue, which is the idea behind this Heartseeker rogue actually. So we don't want to go close, we want to play ranged, but it will only work after the hotfix. So just so you know my reason for doing this video now. And yeah, let's talk about this build a bit. So we are not playing with Victimize here, so if you might ask me, well, this is Heartseeker Rogue, is it the same as the original Heartseeker? Do I just have to wear Andariels Visage and I'm good? Unfortunately, no. You will have to make another Paragon board, you will have to make some reskilling, so this is a completely different build. We also, of course, have some similarities with the original Heartseeker Rogue. So we are also playing with Caltrops and Smoke Grenade, like you can see my skill bar. But this is a completely different build. So the damage scaling works in a completely different way. And yeah, we are playing without Victimize here. So all the damage comes only from Andariels Visage, from this Poison Novas. And yeah, so just to make a disclaimer in the beginning, and another disclaimer, I'm also familiar with Xarrio's Andariels build, so I know that he's quite popular for his Puncture Rogue with Andariels Visage. And I just want to mention that I did not watch this video when I made this guide here. I just wanted to keep a fresh mind and don't get inspired too much. So I watched this video only after I made this guide here. So yeah, please don't write me in the comments, I'm just stealing from Xarrio and this is just Xarrio's build with Heartseeker. No, I did not steal anything, I did not check anything before I made this guide here, so please don't write me these comments. Thank you very much. Okay, so now back to the build. You just saw me clearing in this tier 110, yeah, 110 pit. Pits got nerfed in the patch also, so each class should now farm at least 5 to 10 higher pit levels now. So yeah, it also changed a little bit the balance here in the pit meta, but I think this is a pretty good speed clear anyways. So I don't have perfect gear whatsoever, I have very decent gear but not the best gear, and like I mentioned, Andariels Visage still gonna be buffed by 50%, and actually it's even more than 50%, because we will also proc the Novas from enemies now, so we can proc multiple Poison Novas, or at least this is how I believe this will work. So still a lot of potential in the future. Okay, but now let's talk about this build. So the way how we scale our damage is we, proc this Poison Novas with Lucky Chance and with attack speed. So these are very crucial affixes on your gear that I will show you later, of course. And also we have some very crucial, important damage multipliers in this build. So here we are playing not with Victimize, as I mentioned, but instead we are playing with Close Quarters Combat passive. And with this passive we basically double our damage output, so we have increased damage by around 100% with some proper endgame gear. And the way how we proc this key passive, Close Quarters Combat, is with Shadow Step. So Shadow Step in this build has a much more important role, so this is not only for mobility or escaping breaking crowd control effects, but instead we need to spam our Shadow Step quite often in order to proc our Close Quarters Combat. And not only this, but we have also some other important damage multipliers. So for example, I'm playing with Tibaults Will Pants, which gives me 20% more damage after I'm becoming unstoppable. So Shadow Step grants me this unstoppability, so also works with Tibaults Will. Then we also have this fluidity glyph, which got buffed also in the recent patch, and now deals, increases our total damage by 10% after we activate our agility skill. So also very good synergy here. And we also have something like Eldritch Bounty glyph. And Eldritch Bounty is also 20% poison damage multiplier if we activate our poison imbuement. So in this case, I'm also combining poison imbuement with Shadow Step. So I activate poison imbuement and then use my Shadow Step. This way I proc or activate my my poison imbuement, and this also activates my Eldritch Bounty Paragon node, which gives me this 20% more poison damage. So you can see here Shadow Step, especially with poison imbuement, has a very important role in its build, activating all of these different damage multipliers, which are very important for this build. And speaking about damage multipliers, another very important thing to keep in mind is that we deal most of our damage to crowd control enemies. So it is very important to freeze and stun and knock down and all of the stuff, to apply all of these crowd control effects to enemies as quick as possible. So this is one of the reasons why we are playing with Shared Misery. And yeah, if we freeze our enemies and stun our enemies, knock down enemies, we just increase our damage by a very significant amount. I will also show you later my offensive aspects, then you will understand why. And yeah, so these are some things to keep in mind when playing this build. So for that reason, for example, I also like to skip elite packs that become unstoppable, because unstoppable elite monsters are very difficult to kill. So just focus on some quick kills on crowd-controlled enemies. And, well, like I mentioned, when the hotfix will go live, we will also play more of a ranged rogue here. So this is very melee focused, just because Andariels Visage is not working as intended. And later you will play a more range style build, and yeah, for that reason I can recommend you to just skip on Poison Trap and Caltrops during the pit run, and instead just focus on your Shadow Step and Smoke Grenade. So I would also throw a Smoke Grenade every time you encounter Elite Pack, just because it's also a huge damage bonus. But Caltrops and Poison Trap are skills that I would only use for the boss fight. There we just need the maximum amount of damage. But during the pit run, I think it's much more fun if you just keep the ranged rogue style. And yeah, for these skills you just need to be particularly in the melee range. So for that reason, just keep in mind, I had to do this time because I'm playing a melee range style with the current Andariels interaction. But after the hotfix, I think I will skip on these skills during the pit run. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. And after the next few kills here, we will have the boss fight. And the boss fights also are quite similar to Heartseeker, original Heartseeker Victimize. So what I can recommend you here is engage the fight with Shadow Step, so Poison Imbued Shadow Step, in order to engage the boss. Then you can immediately lay down your Poison Trap and your Caltrops and start spamming your Heartseeker. Then also use your Shadow Step from time to time. So basically every time Shadow Step becomes active, you can just use it in order to keep all your damage multipliers active. And boom, the boss should be killed within 1 or 2 staggers. And with the 50% damage buff coming in the next hotfix, this should be even quicker. And I just lost my connection. Perfect. So yeah, these are the tips I can give you for now, for the pit and for the boss fights in the pit. So I think this build has a lot of potential. So yeah, this is the version which is not even buffed by the latest patch. So I expect, together with the buff, with the hotfix, and with some other interactions that I might have found that will also increase the damage, but I still need to test these things. But if they also will work, I expect that the damage will increase somewhere between 70 to 100% after the hotfix goes live. So yeah, this is pretty huge. And I think this build will be quite a competitor for the original Andariels Visage, for the original Heartseeker Rogue. So Victimize is also very strong. They did not nerf Victimize in the latest patch, so I was a little bit afraid that they will do this, but they did not. So Victimize is still S tier and probably the strongest rogue build, but this Andariels build should be also pretty close, and especially after the hotfix. So yeah, and now I think it's a good idea to show you my gear and the most important aspects. So, of course, you will need Andariels Visage in order for this build to work. This is mandatory. This is the Andariels Heartseeker guide. So, yeah, you need Andariels Visage. And then we can take a quick look at the most important damage multipliers here. So this is also something, so this is one thing I learned from Xarrio's before his guide. He also made a video about double dipping with this retribution aspect. So how retribution currently works is it applies the 60% increased damage to both stunned and knockdown enemies twice. So if you stun and knock down at the same time, you will have this 60% multiplied by another 60% damage multiplier, leading into I think 2.56 or something total damage multiplier. So this is the reason why we want a retribution on our bow or two-handed weapon, because this is double dipping currently and also increases our damage by a lot. Then we have Inner Calm and Elements here, so some generic damage multipliers. We have a Rapid for increased basic attack speed. I will also show you later the attack speed caps for this build and why it's important to reach this. Then we have Moonrise, also only for attack speed and movement speed. We do not care about this 80% basic skill damage at all, but yeah, the movement speed and attack speed. And on our amulet, the best aspect you can put here is Noxious Eyes. So we have here a 30% poison damage multiplier to frozen enemies, which goes to 45% with the amulet. So very nice offensive aspect here. And here we have some Shared Misery, we have Concussive, Tibaults Will, which is pretty cool because, yeah, uniques are not that powerful in this season, but Tibaults Will is actually a very nice fit for this build. That can also increase your damage by another 20%, and it also has some pretty nice defensive stats actually. So I have here 21% damage reduction from close enemies, which is not too bad actually, and also makes me more tanky. And of course, Umbra's aspect on your chest. Yeah, this is mandatory for all rogue builds right now. Umbra's aspect is what keeps me alive basically. So here I can generate my Dark Shrouds for free. And with this Dark Shroud, I benefit from my Skilltree as well, where I have 12 ranks, and this gives me around 60% damage reduction or so. So very important for every rogue build. And yeah, these are the aspects. And now I also want to talk a bit about, let's say, Tibaults Will and some other alternatives that you have in this build. So I really like Tibaults Will. Just like I mentioned, it gives you damage bonus, it has some pretty nice close damage reduction. And before Tibaults Will, I was actually playing with Temerity. So I can look it up here quickly, and I have found some pretty nice Temerities with 80% barrier generation, and my original idea was to combine Temerity with a conceited aspect, so I would also deal more damage while I have a barrier on. So this is a pretty nice combination. But the problem with Temerity is, I'm not sure if it's bugged or something, but it really is, it's very slow in generating this barrier. So I would expect if I deal this millions of damage, poison damage, that Temerity should grant me this barrier pretty quick and also max barrier pretty quick. But somehow it does not work as I wish it would work. And yeah, I'm not sure if it's bugged or if it's just fine, I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, I don't really like Temerity. So for the damage, it's pretty good to play with Temerity and conceited aspect. And it's pretty stylish as well. But in reality, Tibaults Will is much better. So I can recommend you Tibaults Will. But if you want to play with Temerity, you can also try this. So yeah, I think it both is possible, but I feel way more tanky with Tibaults Will. Then another alternatives. So one question you might ask is also, is this build better than the Puncture and Andariels Visage build from Xarrio, let's say? So I have to say, the Puncture build is better than this build in terms of pure damage. So with Puncture, if we would just switch Heartseeker with Puncture, this would be a very similar build, and because Puncture has a more like a higher attack speed or casting animation frame rate, so with Puncture we will reach 2 faster attack speed frames, and it also has a slightly higher lucky chance and some other advantages. So all of these things together will lead into around 30% more damage with Puncture. So with Heartseeker we are losing about 30%, so a third of the damage potential of the Puncture build. But the trade-off here is we can of course play the stylish range stroke build. So when the hotfix will go live, this Poison Novas, they are just visual bugs by the way right now. So, but they will proc and they will work, and then we can play the stylish range stroke build. So in terms of pure damage, Puncture Rogue is slightly better, or 1/3 better, but Heartseeker, well, is a little bit more stylish in my opinion, and something new after the patch. So just for your information, you can decide to switch to Puncture. If you want to play this build with Puncture, you just have to replace this Moonrise aspect here with Pestilent Points aspect, okay? So with Pestilent Points, you will spam your Poison Imbuement automatically with Puncture, and then you can also replace your Poison Imbuement from the skill bar with something like Flurry. You can also play, you can benefit from the Flurry attack speed bonus with combo points. But yeah, the more I think about it, it's a little bit different build than with Puncture, but yeah, the idea is basically the same. So, but for now, let's stick to Heartseeker, because this is a Heartseeker guide. Yeah, then I also mentioned quickly that I have discovered one secret technology, maybe, for this Andariel's poison scaling as well. But I need to test some things further, so I will not tell it now. But if I find out that I was correct, then I will share it in an updated video. But yeah, together with this secret tech, let's say, and with the Andariels Visage buff coming in the hotfix, I suggest that the damage will go up another 100%, so we will deal twice more damage than right now. And the damage right now is already quite decent. So you saw in the gameplay probably that I think my highest poison tick was around 300 million. And I can also try to replicate this here. It always depends, of course. We are playing with the Bane Glyph. But here, yeah, you already see here 371. I just saw 371 million poison tick. So this depends on the Bane Glyph. We have a chance to double our poisoning damage over time, so from time to time. So yeah, a little bit fluctuation here. But I expect that after the hotfix you will reach damage numbers around 400 to 600 million on the bosses. And yeah, I think it's very good for pit pushing and very good for pit speed farming as well. And now I want to talk about Attackspeed Breakpoints. So we can take a look at the breakpoints sheet here. So I really like this sheet. I can also link it in the description as always. And here you can see here for the Andariels Visage Heartseeker version, we can reach the 12 frames attack speed if we have Alchemical Advantage active. So during the pit you will poison a lot of enemies, and this way we can very quickly activate this Alchemical Advantage, which will grant us up to 15% attack speed if we poison enough enemies. And then we will have this 12 frames attack speed. So this means we attack 5 times per second. So 5 Heartseeker attacks per second with 12 frames. And in order to reach this, the only thing that you need to keep in mind, so we are playing with Rapid aspect, we are playing with Moonrise aspect, so these aspects are mandatory. We are playing with Andariels Visage, so if you masterwork, it will reach about 14.5% attack speed. We have the both caps from Close Quarters Combat, we have Alchemical Advantage as I mentioned. You need to proc your Elixir of Advantage, so this is a very good elixir, and I can recommend you to basically proc it all the time, also during speed farming. This will increase your damage in a significant way. We also have Heartseeker attack speed bonus. So the only thing that you need to keep in mind during your gearing section or gearing phase, you will need to find one ring with a greater affix on attack speed. So yeah, one ring, or you can also roll it on your gloves, but on your gloves especially if you trade, gloves are much more expensive, so I can recommend you to find one ring with a greater affix on attack speed. And this one greater Affix is enough with masterworking in order to reach this 12 frames attack speed cap. And if during the boss fight you will not have your alchemical advantage active, so there you will have a 13 frames attack speed, but it's still quite decent. And I can quickly compare it to Puncture. So like I mentioned, with Puncture you have 2 less frames, which means you attack even faster. So with Puncture you can attack even 6 times per second, which increases the DPS in a very important way. And without alchemical advantage you have 11 frames. So this is the difference between Puncture and Heartseeker. So yeah, there's some difference, but like I mentioned, Heartseeker a little bit more stylish and allows you this range rogue build. So just keep in mind, with Heartseeker and Andariels Visage, you need 1 greater Affix on your gear, on your ring for example. I also have it on my ring here, and then you're just good to go. So this is about attack speed. Then let's quickly talk about critical strike chance. So do we actually need critical strike chance or not? So since Andariels Visage, Poison Novas are not interacting with critical strikes whatsoever, we do not need critical strike chance or damage for the damage itself. So it's not necessary at all. But we have some interactions where we actually need a little bit of critical strike chance. So very important one is Umbros here. So we need critical strike chance in order to activate our Umbros aspect. So this is what keeps us alive, like I mentioned, the Dark Shrouds from Umbros, and for that reason we need to have some amount of critical strike chance. So right now I have 23%, 24%, and this is one of the reasons why I want critical strike chance. And another big reason is we want to activate our trick attacks. So here with Concussive I gain also some additional critical strike chance. And also I'm playing with Inner Sight. This also gives me 25% from time to time. And this is important because I want to proc my trick attacks. So when I critical strike my dazed enemies, they are also knocked down for 1 second. And this is very important in order to proc the retribution aspects. Like I mentioned, this is currently double dipping. So we are dealing twice the damage for stunned enemies and knockdown enemies at the same time. So this is a pretty huge damage multiplier, and this is why I also want some critical strike chance in order to knock down enemies after I daze them, so with trick attacks. So these are basically the 2 reasons, and then you could theoretically also play with Siphoning Strikes if you want more healing, and then you'll also need some critical strike chance, but currently I'm not even using it. So yeah, this is about critical strike chance. Then, do we want to make enemies vulnerable? So since we're not playing with Victimize, it's not that important to keep vulnerability active all the time, but especially during boss fights, it's a very nice damage multiplier. So vulnerable enemies just take 20% more damage. So this is also very good for this build. We just want to have more damage. So for that reason, I really like to play with a chance to make enemies vulnerable on one of my rings. And yeah, this helps me especially during the boss fights to keep this 20% damage multiplier active. And talking about the rings and resistances, we have a pretty close, or let's say pretty perfect resistance cap here. So you can see here I'm only 0.1% away from my maximum resistances here. And there's only one thing that you need to keep in mind. So you need to find at least 1 ring which has cold resistance on it. So we basically cap all of resistances with the gems and the Paragon, and my Andariels Visage also have some all stats here. So the only thing you need to keep in mind is you find 1 ring with cold resistance, and then you will be perfectly capped out at all of these resistances here. So yeah, this is one requirement for this build, and unfortunately I could not find a different way where I could solve it, so we just have to solve it this way. And again, talking about rings, some of you might ask me, what about the Xfal ring? So there's this unique ring called Xfal, which also deals 44k, so pretty big amount of damage, flat damage from your damage over time effect. But I can say, please forget about this ring. I have quickly tested it during this guide creation here, and it just sucks, unfortunately. So I really like this idea behind this ring, and I wish we could play more often with Xfal, but unfortunately this ring does no damage currently, so only about 300 to 500k per poison explosion. So this is really nothing compared to the Andariels Visage poison ticks. which go up to 300 or 600 million after the patch. So yeah, this ring unfortunately is not playable right now, so just forget about it. So I hope I did not forget anything so far. Now I also want to quickly go over the most important affixes on your gear. So you guys really liked it in my previous Heartseeker guide that I gave you this overview. So I think it's a good idea to provide you again with this information. So number one affix, of course, is crowd control damage. So because we are playing with the passive close quarters combat here, this is by far the most important stat that you want to get on your gear. So damage versus crowd control enemies, because this will scale this key passive here. And yeah, for that reason, just try to masterwork it wherever possible and get it on as possible of your items. And yeah, this is the highest priority. But then we also have some other very important affixes, such as Lucky Chance. So Lucky Chance is the best affix you can find on the gear, since damage to crowd control enemies actually cannot roll on your gear, so you have to temper it. So this is a tempering only affix actually. So the number one affix that can roll on your gear is Lucky Chance. So for that reason, you want it on your gloves, you want it on your amulet and on your rings, and also with a greater affix if possible. And actually I have a graphic for that where I can show you all of the different affixes here. So we can assume that we have a level 100 endgame character, similar to my character. And I can also show you my stats in a minute. And if we assume that you also have a similar character than I do, what I made here is I made a comparison between these different affixes stats. So we have Lucky Chance, we have Dexterity and Damage over time, which can also be replaced by flat damage, because flat damage is also currently bugged and counts twice with damage over time effects. So damage over time or flat damage is basically the same affix right now for this build. But if we compare these three affixes, all of them rolled with a greater affix, then what you can see here is the amount of increased damage that I gain from applying one of these affixes here. So for example, if I would have a ring with a greater affix on Lucky Chance, this would give me 7.72% increased damage, while if I have this damage over time affix, I would only gain about 5.3 more damage. So like I mentioned, this is I can show you in my stats in a minute, but this is only working for level 100 endgame characters with proper gear, and here you just have a general idea of how effective each of these stats are. So the priority here is Lucky Chance, Dexterity, and then damage. And with the amulet, you have Frigid Finesse as your most important affix, then you have Exploit, Lucky Chance, and only after Lucky Chance, you have things like Malice or Deadly Venom. So Lucky Chance is more important than Malice or Deadly Venom in this build, and Frigid Finesse by far the most important one. And now I can quickly show you my stats here. So I have 150% all damage, I have about 550 damage with poisoning, which is pretty huge multiplier, and here around 1000 damage versus crowd control enemies. So yeah, if you have a similar character like I do, then these are the item affix priorities that I just showed you. And now it's time to talk about a skill tree. So here we have Heartseeker. So we don't care about the damage of Heartseeker. This is not like in the original Heartseeker guide or build. Here we just care about the Lucky Chance of Heartseeker in order to proc our Andariels Visage. So this is how the build works. We just want to stack our Lucky Chance here. And yeah, so for that reason we do not invest any points into Heartseeker. We don't care about the damage. Here you want Discipline Shadow Step in order to cast more frequently. Shadow Step very important in this build. We are not taking points into Weapon Mastery, also very important. Andariels Visage, the Poison Over, is not benefiting from Weapon Mastery, so don't invest points here. I did not forget it, it's on purpose. As always, as many points in Dark Shrouds as possible in order to not die in the higher tier pits. Then here, Subverting Poison Trap for more poison damage after casting Poison Trap. And also here Deadly Venom, additional 9% poisoning bonus. Here Mixed Poison Imbuement is nothing that you really need to have, but I kind of like it. This just gives me a little bit more safe poison imbuement uptime on the cooldown. And here 3 points into alchemical advantage, maybe also a little bit overkill, but I don't have any points where I can invest it anyways, or some other skills where I can invest it, so here, a little bit of an overkill here. Frigid Finesse, very important, and yeah, Close Quarters Combat. So here I have about 100% increased damage. Don't have any points invested here. We also have maximum amount of movement speed, so I don't need haste. I just take this stutter step here and then I reach my 200% movement speed cap. Yeah. Then the Paragon board. So we start here with the Kenny glyph, very nice glyph for 10% more damage with non-physical damage like poison. Then we go into this cheap shot board with exploit, so we want to make enemies vulnerable, just for this 20% increased damage versus vulnerable enemies. We don't benefit from this damage reduction versus load too much. You can lay down your caltrops from time to time if you feel like you will die in the pit. Then caltrops will apply this damage reduction buff also, so keep that in mind. Here we have this new buff Fluidity glyph, so now Fluidity increases my damage also after casting my Shadow Step, let's say. And this also has some very nice synergy with this board, so we have a higher amount of maximum life here and all damage. So we get 9.3% more maximum life, which is pretty good. So very nice synergy with this No Witness board and Fluidity glyph. Then we go to this fourth board, which is Exploit Weakness. So here we take the cold resistance nodes, that's why you need one ring with cold resistance, and the other cold res comes from this Paragon node here. We have a control glyph with maximum amount of intelligence for maximum amount of damage to crowd control enemies for our key passive. Then we go to this Layrina's Instinct board. Here we take the last resistance nodes that we need in order to cap out, perfectly cap out actually, like I showed you. So here we also have Tracker, this increases our poison duration, which is very good. And then we have the Bane glyph, which also increases our, has a chance to double the amount of poison damage. And this is also a discovery I made lately with Wodiju's video. So Wodiju has uploaded a video where he showed that Deadly Ambush right now is bugged. So this might change in the future if they also hotfix this bug here. But right now it does not only increase your critical strike damage, but it increases your total damage. So Deadly Ambush also works with flat damage effects like Poison Nova from Andariels Visage. So for that reason, we just take it for now. It increases our damage by another 23%, but this will probably get fixed sooner or later, and then we need to adjust this Paragon board a little bit and replace this board here. And the last board, the 7th board we take here is Eldritch Bounty. So again, 20% more damage with poison. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of this Paragon. As always, we have 7 boards. We have 4 different legendary nodes, which are increasing our damage. And we have 6 glyphs. And we are perfectly capped out at resistances. And have pretty good life nodes here. So yeah, for me, this is the perfect Paragon board right now for this Andariel's Poison build. And yeah, one more small detail here. If you feel like you're not tanky enough and you're dying too much, you can also replace this Kenny glyph with something like Ranger. So if I find it here, where is it? Kenny Turf here, Ranger. So with Ranger, you will take 10% reduced damage while wielding a ranged weapon. So you can replace Kenny with Ranger. You just need to rearrange this board a little bit and get this dexterity nodes here instead of intelligence. But this is a tip I can give you. If you feel not tanky enough, then you can replace Kenny with Ranger. But for now, I stick to Kenny just because I don't have many problems with survivability. Okay guys, this was the guide. I guess it's a very long video again, but I hope you learned something and I covered all the most important stuff here. So the conclusion here is, especially after the hotfix, this build will be even stronger. So I think it's very close in power levels compared to the original Heartseeker, Victimize Heartseeker. So yeah, very close builds. I think the Puncture Andariels Visage Rogue might be even better than Victimize Heartseeker now after the patch, but we will see. So very close in terms of power level, very fun to play. And yeah, I hope I see you in the next videos. Guys, thank you for watching. Keep me a like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy my content. Would be very nice. And yeah, I see you. Have a nice day and bye bye.